your numbers. And I'm praying to God it's not all of you. But it's not. It's just a few who are having trouble, and we want to accommodate you. I will to a certain extent, but I'm gonna give it like 5 minutes per vote. It takes 30 seconds now for all of it to go through. We'll see how that works.
You want to set the timer? Or kind of, sort of?
Set the timer, and then I'll tell him, and then if I need to be gracious, I'll give him another minute. All right, we're going to have a prayer, and then the laity are going to vote. If you are laity, please get to your table as soon as possible, because we will go into a vote. And I'm going to give about 5 minutes to take the vote. If you feel that you can't accomplish the vote of one person in 5 minutes, then I need for you to raise the pink flag now, and we'll get your own special assistant. I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm just trying to get us through this agenda. And I want to assist you if you need it. All right? Larry, are you at a microphone? Yes, you are. That'd be microphone 2. Please be in a spirit of prayer.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, help us to feel your presence with us during this time of great turmoil in our church, our society, and throughout the world. As we move forward in this journey to carry out your mission and healing ministry in the world, we pray that you will enable us to listen, hear, understand, and respond with grace to those who are in pain. Help us to be instruments of your grace in the world, and provide us with the wisdom, vision, and courage needed to seek peace with justice during the next stages of our journey. Just as many of us are in pain today, many in my 1973 US 2 class felt fractured by a divided nation, crises in the political discourse, and a general conference decision that destroyed careers and denied our church opportunities to benefit from highly talented leaders with unique gifts and graces for reaching marginalized members in our communities. As in other times throughout history, you were with us then and guided us then, and we are confident that you will be with us during our current challenges. Guide us as we choose our new teams of leaders and empower them to lead us forward. We pray that you will forgive us when we fall short and help us to forgive others as we carry out your ministry to preach good news to the poor, proclaim release to those who are prisoners, proclaim release and proclaim recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim your acceptable year for all of your children. For all of this we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. And the people who have been doing the prayers have been in some form of mission service over the years, and so I was reminded of that as Larry gave his prayer. If you're laity, please go to your table as soon as possible, because I'm about to open the next ballot. I would ask that that you put up the results of the lay vote last time so people can see that. As I stated before, if you feel like you need to have somebody assist you in making in the voting process, then raise your pink flag now, and somebody will, from the credentialing committee or something, will help you do that. All right. So, laity, you're going to vote for one person. And if they tell me when they can start voting, you can vote now. We're going to give you 5 minutes to vote, and then I'm going to close the vote. When you're up to- okay. Has everyone finished? Is there anybody who's not yet gotten one vote in? Is everybody finished? Are you good over there? All right, good. Then I'm going to close the laity vote. Laity, hand the device to a clergy person. Please show the results from the clergy ballot. All right, there's the results from the clergy ballot. And they'll give me the sign when it's time to start voting. I'll give you 5 minutes, unless you're done sooner. The lady were. Please vote now. Okay, how you doing? Are you done? Did you hear no? Are you finished? Okay. All right. All right. Anybody not yet finished? Over here? Okay. How about now? All right. Anybody not finished? Okay. Finished? Anybody not finished? Then I'm closing the clergy vote, clergy ballot. All right, good job. Whew. Now we hope we don't have a gazillion invalids, but it's very encouraging. We might get through. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lois Moreland Dean, who's the president of the United Methodist Women. By the way, the prayers have also been by United Methodist Women. And she is going to introduce our guest speaker, Harriett Olson, the General Secretary of United Methodist Women.
United Methodist Women is celebrating 150 years in mission. I'm so godly proud to be a part of this legacy of women who over the years have looked out at the world and caught God's vision of love and responded with more than 90 national mission institutions like community centers and schools and residence for women survivors of domestic violence and their children, and with support from international ministries like hospitals and schools, scholarships for higher education, income-generating skills training for women and youth, and support of the work of the Central Conference United Methodist Women, Sisters in Africa and Asia. Thanks be to God. The best way to commemorate, to honor such history of women in mission is to make more history of women in mission. And that's what United Methodist Women is doing today. At this pivotal time in the church and in our nation, United Methodist Women stands as a place to belong for all women, committed to loving and serving God by turning their faith, hope, and love into action. Children, for women, children, and youth. United Methodist Women is for you. I invite you to come and join us. This short video will show you why.
United Methodist Women shall be a community of women whose purpose is to know God, to experience freedom as whole persons through Jesus Christ, to develop a creative, supportive fellowship, to expand concepts of mission through participation in the global ministries of the church. United Methodist Women began in Boston, 1869, by a handful of women who raised funds to send Isabella Thoburn and Dr. Clara Swain to India. As they cared for women, Swain and Thoburn also trained women to be educators and healthcare providers. The effect was exponential. They helped found what would become Clara Swain Hospital and Health Clinic and Isabella Thoburn College for Women, and so launched a 150-year global story that has become the story of millions of women, children, and youth. Their purpose is our purpose. We listened to women in our communities and heard stories of heartbreak and hope. Together, we built neighborhood centers and schools across the U.S., changing whole communities and countless lives. There are 98 of these institutions operating today, whose roots circle back to orphanages, boarding homes for women and children, schools, and shelters. Hundreds of dedicated deaconesses and home missioners serve local communities across the U.S. through their pledge to love, justice, and service. Most U.S. annual conferences in the United Methodist Church have at least one United Methodist Women National Mission Institution. We listened to our international sisters across the Methodist connection and learned about their cultures, strengths, and challenges. Together, we sent missionaries, equipped women to read the Bible through their own lens, built schools, hospitals, and clinics, and invested in clean water, micro-enterprises, and food stability in over 100 countries around the world. We started church-wide initiatives, including the US2 and Church and Community Workers. We serve in local churches, annual, jurisdictional, and general conferences, as well as on school boards and community, state, and national legislatures. Together, we have been on the front lines of the work of racial justice in the church and in the world, gifted the United Methodist Church with the Charter for Racial Justice, and worked tirelessly for ordination rights for women. Today, United Methodist Women members are at the forefront of social issues that continue to marginalize women, children, and youth, and are currently engaged in 4 social campaigns: Just Energy for All, Interrupting the School-to-Prison Pipeline, Living Wage for All, and Ending Maternal Mortality. United Methodist Women members are stewards of all God has given, giving to the United Methodist Church first, then funding the work further through member dollars given to serve the more urgent needs of others. United Methodist Women is and will be a dynamic community of women in movement with God, experiencing and extending freedom and the opportunity to live as whole persons as we strive to understand and ever expand what it means to be in mission with women, children, and youth.
Northern Illinois Conference, it's my pleasure to introduce to some and present to others the leader of the largest denominational faith organization for women in the world, Harriett Jane Olson, General Secretary and CEO of United Methodist Women. Please join me in welcoming this year's Bible study leader.
Thank you so much, friends. What a privilege it is to be with the Northern Illinois Conference tonight at this important meeting during this important work. And what an honor it is to open the Bible together. Now we're going to open the Bible together, right? Bibles? Phones, yes, I see them. Okay. What we're going to do may never have been attempted before. We're having Bible study after dinner. And we're going to start in the book of Numbers. I knew you would be up for it. Numbers chapter 27. I've always said I never want to read the scripture on Pentecost. Well, this is a chapter that's close to it. So, all you scholars, please be gentle with your critique of the names. This is a story about Zelophehad's daughters, starting at verse 1. The daughters of Zelophehad, Heifer's son, Gilead's grandson, Malchir's great-grandson, and Manasseh's great-great-grandson, belonging to the clan of Manasseh and son of Joseph, came forward. His daughters' names. Thank God for the names. His daughters' names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chiefs, and the entire community at the entrance of the meeting, and said, "Our father died in the desert. He wasn't part of the community who gathered against the Lord with Korah's community. He died for his own sins, but he had no sons. Why should our father's name be taken away from his clan because he didn't have a son? Give us property among our father's brothers." Hear a deep intake of breath from the gathered community. What? Moses is a wise leader. Moses says, "Let me pray about it." Moses brought their case before the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "Zelophehad's daughters are right in what they're saying. By all means, give them property as an inheritance among their father's brothers. Hand over their father's inheritance to them. Speak to the Israelites and say, if a man dies and doesn't have a son, you must hand his inheritance over to his daughters. If he doesn't have verse 9. If he doesn't have a daughter, you'll give his inheritance to his brothers. If he doesn't have brothers, you should give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, you should give his inheritance to his nearest relative from his clan. This will be a regulation and a case law for the Israelites as the Lord commanded Moses." Thanks be to God for this reading. So how many of you have met Zelophehad's daughters? Yeah? I think it would be well if we said their names together. Names are important, right? So the first one listed in this chapter is Mahlah. And then Noah. And then Milcah. And then Tirzah. And Hoglah. 5 daughters. What a blessing. Think of Tevye, 5 daughters, 5 dowries. They're unmarried, and they come before the highest authorities and the people of Israel just as they are about to cross into the promised land. Now, the Bible in this place does not give us what a novelist might. We'd like to know their inner thoughts. Were they nervous? Were they angry? Were they encouraged? Was Mama standing somewhere saying, go on, do that? We don't know. But we do know that they had the insight and the confidence and the knowledge of the law to be able to make a request that the community could receive. They made a claim not because they were needy, because they were worried. They made a claim based on the right of their father to be remembered in the clan. Turns out it was a powerful argument. Moses stepped away from the setting and brought the concerns before the Lord. You might imagine that Moses also could be a little nervous, could be getting advice from lots of people. But the Lord said to him, "This is right. These women are entitled to stand in the community of Israel as you move into the promised land." So, what was at issue in this story? Certainly their own future, right? Their ability to bring something to a marriage, their livelihood, perhaps a place for their widowed mother. So certainly they had a personal stake in what was happening. But they also had a claim to be named among the children of Israel. We know that the Bible doesn't always name the women. And so we note how many times their names are listed. And because there's 5 of them, we tend to say the daughters of Zelophehad. United Methodist women are familiar with this kind of a pattern. It's very common for us to forget the women's name, to forget the women's work. As we go around from place to place and as we tell our stories of 150 years, it's very common to see, as we do in stories about the foreign mission, stories about the national mission, to see the Women's Foreign Missionary Association, the Women's Home Missionary Association, the Women's Parsonage and Home Society work listed as work of the Methodist Church. In some ways, it's not wrong. These people were members of the church, whatever it was named at the time. But in other ways, it's not right at all. It's work that wasn't funded by the church. It's work that wasn't always honored by the church. And it's work that wasn't always comfortable for the church. And I think that Zelophehad's daughters, Mala, Noah, Milcah, Tirzah, and Hagla, had seen that happen in their own experience. It's amazing to us in today's text to see their names mentioned not only here in chapter 27, but the preceding chapter, a subsequent chapter, and finally in Joshua 17, when the property is actually delivered to them. So the property distribution at this point in the history of the people of Israel was based on a census, the second census that had been done. And the census was taken to identify all of those who were eligible for military service. So males, 20 years old and older. And then in chapter 27, the census is used for the purpose of the land distribution. And it's at that point that the daughters come and say, no, wait, not so fast. The census was for one purpose, and now you're applying it to something else. We see this pattern happen time and again. Gender neutral, race neutral, status neutral laws are applied in ways that limit the capacity of women, capacity of persons of color, and others to access the benefits that are intended to be given. So the daughters of Zelophehad have a lot to tell us about engaging systems as they're being developed, as they're being built. Bold women, knowledgeable women, and women committed to being part of God's community. In so many ways, these women are speaking up for themselves as moral agents. And one of the things I want to suggest to you tonight is that that is part of the work of the church, certainly, but it's part of the work of United Methodist Women. Today, in our purpose, we talk of becoming whole persons through Jesus Christ. And Mala, Noah, Milcah, Tirzah, and Hagla were claiming to be whole persons, to be qualified, to have a place in the kingdom. But the story doesn't end there. If you flip over to Numbers 36, you'll see that the uncles appear. Yeah, this should be background music, right? It's a little dramatic. And without going through that whole thing and reading it, the uncles are clearly the people whose property has been taken away from them, right? Like, they could have had the property that was given to these 5 daughters. And so 9 chapters later, they've had some time to think about it, and they come to Moses and say, you know, I see that there's a problem here. If you give the property to these girls and they marry outside the clan is going to lose the access to the property. And clearly, that's what's at issue, right? We want to preserve the boundaries of the clan and the identity of the clan. And Moses hears that request and says they should marry inside the clan. And the women receive that and accept that restriction. The story teaches us that we have to stay alert, that not every decision is a final decision, that things once offered can be retracted, that things we once thought were incorporated into law, were part of the book of discipline, were settled, can be carved away. And some larger interest, seemingly larger interest, the identity of the clan, can supersede the personhood of these sisters. So we think about Mala, Noah, Milcah, Tirzah, and Hagla. We're grateful for their names. We're grateful for their work. We're grateful for their presence in the text. I want to take a minute and ask you to think about where you see yourself in this text. As I do that, I want to offer a caution. I think sometimes we have to be pretty careful about how we identify with the stories and parables of the gospel. If we identify with a person who is actually not the person that God's trying to get us to see, we can apply the story totally differently. Let me give you an example. I think many of us in the prodigal son story identify with the prodigal son. We want that reception, right? We want to go home to the father with the arms open, and we should. But many, many times, especially we who are in the church, should think about the possibility that our closer identification is with the older son. We stayed, we worked. This guy went away and spent all the money, and we are not up for a party. Right? And sometimes we ought to be thinking about the father. Can we throw our arms wide? can we welcome this person who did not behave the way we were hoping, but is coming home, is available, is close? So in the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, I wonder if you could think of a time when you needed to stand up for yourself, step right up to the front of the tent of meeting, in front of God and everyone, and make a claim. Or I wonder if you can think of a time when you were perhaps like the chiefs and the other elders, standing in silent judgment while someone staked their claim. Or I wonder if you can think of a time when you perhaps were like Moses. You had some authority and some responsibility, and you were faced with a difficult question. It came outside the tradition, outside the pattern. And I wonder if some of us can identify with the uncles engaged in a little bit of damage control, trying to say, well, yes, it's a good idea, but maybe not so much. So take a minute to think about that, and then I'm going to ask you to have a bit of a conversation. But let's think about who you might identify with in this story and in what kind of a situation. I invite you now to share with someone sitting beside you at your table one place where you found a place of identity with one of the characters in the story. If you haven't had a chance to speak, please switch with your partner. Please switch with your partner so that you can all have a chance to speak. I'm going to interrupt your conversations. I'm going to interrupt your conversations and bring you back to the shared focus. I hope you found people in the story that you identified with and thinking about some of the ways that these persons interacted as they tried to follow God's pattern might connect with your story. I think it connects with the story of United Methodist Women in many, many ways. It's tempting when we do the kind of storytelling that we're doing because of our 150th anniversary and the conference is doing because of its 180 years of ministry, to hit the highlights and to tell the success stories and to talk about the big buildings and the extent of the networks. And there's some pretty colorful characters in United Methodist Women, and it's tempting to tell the stories about how they persisted in their call. But tonight, since we started with law, property rights, a census, I want to talk about the organization. I want to talk about the structure. One of the things that United Methodist Women's long history demonstrates is the power of organization. Many of the individual works were impactful for a short period of time. What allows them to continue is the participation of women beyond their local scope in a systematized, committed, long-term pattern of support. So it's not just Hattie Rankin, who invaded the district in West Dallas where the Bonnie and Clyde Club hung out and said, this is the place where we need to minister to Spanish speakers. It's not just Catherine Maurer, who went every day to Angel Island to meet immigrants off the coast of San Francisco, or Alma Matthews, who walked the docks of New York to gather up immigrant girls coming by themselves undefended. It's the history of women in congregations around the country and around the world coming together to hear God's call, to learn about the places beyond their experience, and to work together to make a difference for women, children, and youth. It's a story of persistence. It's a story of hard and sometimes very unsatisfying work. In the late 1800s, when the women's missions were rising up in various places, and city mission societies, and deaconess movements, and all these people were feeling this call of God, people around the country realized that there was a need for training and education. You know the story because of the Lucy Ryder Meyer and the Chicago Training School, right? Deaconesses, city missionaries, all kinds of people in service. One of the interesting things about the Chicago Training School is that not too long after Lucy Ryder Meyer and her husband passed, big changes had to be made. Funding was vulnerable. They had never really connected to the whole organization of United Methodist Women. And it happened to many training schools. They were back and forth, there was connection, there was communication, but it didn't get blended into the organization. On the other hand, schools like the school that became Scarlett Bennett, the National Training School that started in Kansas City, were part and parcel of the women's work. It started when Belle Bennett went to the Women's Missionary Council and said, these young women who are coming into service need training. The story of that meeting is that she went to Arkansas at the request of the person who was chairing the committee to make her presentation. And we know, because she told someone, unlike the biblical writer, she was very nervous. And the chair of the committee, seeing that, pulled up a chair and said, "Sit here, dear, and tell us what's on your heart." The work of United Methodist Women is the work of following that vision, and it's also the work of, "Sit here, dear, and tell us what's on your heart." It's that work together, it's that organizing work, it's that seeing what's possible and challenging others to join you. Still, the history of our organization, like all organizations, has many ups and downs. It was recognized in all of the branches of the former branches of what's now the United Methodist Church. We date 1869 because that's the oldest branch in the Methodist Episcopal Church. But in the Methodist Episcopal Church South, they were organized just a little later. And as they did all over the country, they met resistance. The women were not welcome to speak. The women were struggling to find their place. And in 1910, the General Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church South said, there's too many of these women's organizations. We need one women's missionary council. And that was voted. And that was the single biggest galvanizing factor for lay women's vote in the MECS that ever happened. Right? That was the beginning of a desire to change the system, because the women saw that they were not in control of what happened. Something similar happened in the 1939 merger of all of the three Methodist churches that came together at that point. All the women's societies were joined into one of the three related but independent corporations that formed the Board of Missions. So there was a women's division, there was a national division, and there was a world division, each separately incorporated in 1939. But by 1964, the church had decided that all this separate activity was too much. And so we see this little carving back. If you hear the voice of the uncles saying, no, wait a minute, this can never work. And the women's division was brought under the Board of Missions, which was formalized then by the end of the merger in 1972. So what I want to say to you present is that the work has to be continually tended. The work has to be continually tended. It needs to be supported, and we need to be alert. Times of merger and change in the Methodist denominations have not always been safe times for United Methodist Women and its work. It's important for us to stay focused on the work with women, children, and youth at this time. And others of you are in organizations that similarly have a long history and values and efforts that need to be protected. And that's why we have to have crucial, serious conversations about how we organize for the Methodist Church that God is calling us to be. I also want to mention that one of the things that was hotly debated over the whole life of the United Methodist Women and its predecessors up until 1956 was the call of women to preach. One of the great concerns of the clergy when women started to organize was that they would start preaching. We can't have those women preaching. Second only to the worry that they were going to collect all the money and they wouldn't be able to fund their churches. That also recurs over time. But it was an ongoing battle, and so one of the things that the Chicago Training School had to deal with was the pressure on their theological studies. They followed what was then the bishop's course of study. So think of the course of study for local pastors, almost entirely, except for the courses on preaching and the sacraments. So they were getting a pretty high level of education. And people would come by and monitor to make sure that they were not preaching. Now, we do know that they went out and spoke, I guess, at revival meetings. They exhorted. They taught the text. They read the text. They felt the call of God. But the church continually pressured to keep them in their place. And so one of the things that was instituted from the Women's Home Missionary Association was that they would focus on service and justice. These are the proper avenues for the Women's Mission Society. And of course today, one of the complaints is that the work is not adequately evangelistic. Right? So now the church needs members, and the church is saying we have to have more evangelism, right? So working in institutions within institutions, you see this kind of a dialogue. So this call for who we were. The Deaconess boards from time to time declined the application of persons to become a deaconess because they knew that they were called to preach. Can you imagine applying to the Deaconess board, finding a place for your calling as a layperson, and then being declined because you knew and they knew that you were called to preach? It must have been heartbreaking. But the women's organization, never totally of one mind, so friends, that's nothing new, never totally of one mind, worked hard for women's full clergy rights. I had an interview not too long ago with a senior woman leader who is now in a nursing home, and she was telling me some of her stories. And she said one of the high points of her life was collecting hundreds and maybe thousands of petitions seeking full clergy rights for women that were sent to the 1952 General Conference. So you think about the letters, the stacks, the petitions that were sent and had to be coordinated. That effort was not successful in 1952. As we know, it was not till 1956 that was voted. But the United Methodist Women's predecessors have been active in trying to make sure that the institution will honor the rights of women to bear God's message. And I think that it connects deeply to the work of Mala, Noah, Milcah, Tirzah, and Hagla to claim their identity among the people of Israel. Claim your identity as beloved child of God. Follow God's call, whether the institution supports it or not. God is calling. The world is needy. Women, children, and youth suffer. We must let those needs break our hearts and God's Spirit lift us up into lives of service, lives of justice, and lives of faith. Thanks be to God for the people that go before us.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I'm sure all of us learned some things along the way, both of Scripture and our history. So the laity ballot, number 6, which we just took, I'm going to report 274 votes cast, 0 votes invalid. 138 needed for majority, but no majority, no election. Clergy ballot number 6, 200 votes cast, 7 votes invalid. 97 needed for majority. Alka Lyle was elected with 50.26% of the vote. All right. So if you would put up the laity results, and if laity would take your device, put it on the table, you're going to vote for one person. I'll give you 3 minutes to vote. Takes 30 seconds. I'll give you 3 minutes. Vote for one. You guys are good to go. Okay, vote for one. Start now. Right, okay. That'll help. Great, 30 seconds. Are you ready? All right, then I'm closing the laity vote. If you'd please put up the clergy results. There you go. And laity, give your device to a clergy person if you haven't already. And you will vote for 2. Do not vote for Alka Lyle, or your whole thing will be invalid. Vote for 2, and you can vote now. Give you 3 minutes. All right, you good? Okay, all right, just checking. Are we good? How about now? Yes? Yes? All right, I'm closing the clergy ballot. All right, very good. Now, we will do some legislation. Yeah. All right. So we're going to begin. Katie will lead us.
I invite you to turn your attention to document number 700.16, 700.16. It's on page 29 of the legislative download. As a reminder for all of our legislative work, as you are working to find your page, if you have an amendment to make, we encourage you to find that amendment form at the usher's table and have that written out before you come to the microphone, because the runners will take the top 2 copies from you, and you will be reading from that bottom copy as you make your motion at the microphone.
All right.
Bishop, on behalf of the author of which is the annual conference shepherding team, I move acceptance of this document.
All right. 700.16 is properly before you.
Approval, rather.
Any questions? Anything you want to do with it? Are you ready to vote? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right. Now you're scaring me. All right, okay. All right, and that's approved. Okay, moving on.
Moving on, I would like to turn your attention to document 700.01. This document begins on page 9 of the legislative download. Most of the actual text of the document appears on page 10. However, just the titling is on page 9.
Okay. So 700.01 is properly before you. Yes. Is that microphone 6, right?
Can I move it before we?
Oh,
I
I'm
need
sorry.
to move it first.
You didn't move
sorry.
it?
Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of this document.
Thank you very much. Microphone 6.
Bishop, I'd like to submit a friendly amendment.
I do amendments, no friendly ones. They
Brilliant.
always come back to bite you.
Okay. S.E. Brick, Evanston First United Methodist Church, laity. Insert on line 20, at least 3, quote, at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, preceding at least 3 LGBTQ. So the sentence would actually read, the task force shall include at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, at least 3 LGBTQ laity or clergy, and then continue as written.
Oh, so the insertion is before 3 LGBTQ laity.
No, it's for 3 people of color. Laity.
But
before.
But you're inserting it right before them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just had the in place. So 3 people of color, at least 3 people of color, then it continues on 3 LGBTQ.
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there a second to the amendment? It's seconded. Do you want to speak to it?
I had spoke with the author about this, increasing the, centering the voices of people in color and LGBTQ people. We don't necessarily need them to be separate groups, but did think that representation was important in such a diverse area.
Okay. Somebody want to speak against? All right. Any other speakers? Ready to vote? All those in favor, at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, inserted right before at least 3 LGBTQ. All right? All those in favor say yes. Those opposed say no. And it prevails. It becomes a part of the main motion, which is the whole document before us. All right? Any other action on this? Ready to vote? All those who would approve 700.01 as you have amended it, please say yes. Those opposed say no. All right, but it does prevail. Thank you.
Well, we seem to be moving.
Yeah, well, night's early.
It's just the first inning.
It's good.
Why can't I find in my tabs here? Oh, there it is. So I invite you to turn to document 700.12, 700.12. It can be found on page 26 of the legislative download.
All right. $700.12.
Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of document 700.12, do no harm, limiting complaints and trials.
All right. It's properly before you. Any action? Ready to vote? All those in favor say yes. Those opposed say no. Thank you, and yet it prevails. All right.
Okay. Next in order, I invite you to turn to document 700.06. Document 700.06 on page 17 of the legislative download. Suspend payments to General Administration Fund. Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of this piece of legislation.
All right, 700.06, properly before you. Any action? Yes. Microphone 5.
Joe Johnson, clergy, First Elmhurst. I just have a point of information question. So if this legislation passes and our local churches decide to send our full apportionment payment to the conference, then what happens with this general administration fund?
Good question. Would you go to a microphone 3, please, for the answer?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. So currently, because this petition was being proposed from CFA, when we changed the apportionments to local churches that explained part of it being for the conference and then enumerated the amounts for each of the general funds, we did not assign an apportionment to this particular fund because this petition was pending. If this petition does not succeed, we would then add that fund to each apportionment statement, and that would be how we proceed. If this does pass, then we would continue to not apportion this fund to every local church among the general church funds, and so you would have 100% payment. If you pay your conference fund apportionment 100%, you're a 100% conference church. If you pay the conference fund and you do all the Rainbow Covenant lines, you would be a Rainbow Covenant church. And if you do 100% conference and 100% of the general church funds of the ones we enumerated on your statement, you would get the GCFA certificate of being 100% GCFA church.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Oh. All right. Over here? And it must be microphone 1. Who's going to microphone 1? Okay.
Michelle Aberwise-Laycock, Extension Ministries, CPE Supervisor, Aurora Healthcare, Milwaukee. I wondered, once the task force has reported back and changes are made, then do we pay the money? It doesn't say how long we hold the money for.
Lonnie? Yeah, I'm not sure I heard it all.
Does it? So at the line 44, as a result, a task force is now investigating voter credentials and allegations of improper voting. So if something gets changed, then do we pay our
Got it.
money?
All right, Lonnie?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. I think that there would be eventually a change, and there would be a time in which we come back to the General Administration Fund. So this is only this season. If this passes, it would be for a season, and then we would come back to the annual conference from CFA with a proposal to restore the General Administration Fund at some point, God willing.
Is there a follow-up here?
Is there a time set for the task force to report?
That task force is not our task force. That's a task force of the General Commission on the General Conference. So I can't answer that question specifically.
Okay. Bishop, do you know?
It's hard to say, and then it's hard to know what this task force is going to report. We have some check points along the way. Fair enough question, I think, because in the fall we have a special annual conference session around our own budget, and by that time I would hope we'd have some clarity about what they have identified and what, if anything, they're going to do to address the problem. I would, so that's at least one checkpoint.
Okay.
All right? There were other people at microphone 3, but you kind of disappeared. Did you get your question answered? Is that the deal? All right, glad to know. Microphone, what is that, 2?
So
Name?
I think this is Dennis Langdon, Morgan Park and Trinity United Methodist Churches, Chicago. I think this is a related topic. So is this binding, and what is the mechanism for undoing it if General Conference behaves differently?
So binding to whom?
Is it binding upon the conference not to send funds for the payment of General Conference, the event, the $117,000 that's referred to?
Okay, Lonnie?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. Bishop, Dennis, I think it's binding on the conference until the conference decides something else. So we could come back in November with a different view. We could come back next June with a different view. I think it would be binding until we make a different choice.
All right, microphone 6.
Thank you, Bishop. John McCoy, Hinsdale United Methodist Church. A couple of questions that I will try to connect so that it's not a series of questions. I'm not sure that everyone knows exactly what is supported by the General Administration Fund, and it might be helpful to detail what exactly is supported by those funds, so what will be the result. Also, while there's a rationale given, I'm not sure what is the intended result or intended impact of this legislation. So if there could be a little more explanation, perhaps, of what exactly is hoped will be achieved by withholding these funds. There was a question earlier that I'm not sure if it was answered, that once the funds are held, or once the funds are not being sent, how will they be held or invested or maintained in the interim until there is a change in policy?
Lonnie, or somebody.
Beard. Kelly Beard, clergy, Holy Covenant, United Methodist Church. So I can provide you the context for this legislation that came out of CCFA. The context was, CCFA was anticipating that the outcomes of General Conference would be uncertain, and so even beforehand, we had decided as a CCFA to sort of wait and see what would happen. And so particularly in response to what is funding the General Conference, it is this General Administration Fund. So Reverend McCoy, just that it's the General Administration Fund funds General Conference. Lonnie might be able to provide you with a more detailed, if there's anything else that it funds. My understanding is that it's only General Conference. The second thing is that where the money would go would just be held in escrow just in the Northern Illinois Conference. There is a question about could that money be used for something? I think that's a legitimate question. I think we just wanted to start with just having it being held for the sake of our conference, figuring out what we want to do in response to the new environment that we have under the traditional plan. I think that was everything, but let me know if it wasn't.
So the General Administration Fund also covers the work of the Judicial Council, which would be very important to be funded to continue to address many of the issues that are before the denomination. Right. And if there are other things that are supported by the General Administration Fund, I think it might be important to know what those things are, because it's not just the General Conference, but there are other ministries that will be impacted by withholding funds or withholding these specific funds.
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. So just to kind of clarify a piece here, we aren't collecting these funds from local churches, so we're not holding them and we're not investing them. We're not asking for them as we've set up the apportionment system currently. If this petition fails, we would then ask, and that would be added to your apportionment statement. As I understand it, the General Administration Fund pays for General Conference, the cost of Judicial Council, Archives and History, and GCFA in part. So GCFA kind of is in every fund.
All right. I'll go to microphone 3, then is that 2? 2, and then 6. How about that? Is that good? And 1. Okay. 3, 2, 6, and 1. All right, 3.
Point of information, Bishop. My name is Will Ed Green. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I serve at Boundary United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. I'm just curious to know whether or not there are any repercussions. So are there any mechanisms by which the General Church can withhold grants, scholarship monies, or other monies provided to churches in the Northern Illinois Annual Conference? Or is this just something that will be kind of a thorn in the side of the General Church?
Can you state that?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. No.
All right, microphone 2.
Myron McCoy, First United Methodist Church, Chicago. I would move to table this.
All right. There's a motion to table. That means short term, not long term. You're not sending it away. Is that your intent? Or is there a second to table? All right. It's not debatable, it's not amendable. It's just a majority, but this means it will come back to us. And I would, the reason for tabling would be helpful to the chair in order to know how to bring it back. It's not a debate, just an assistance to the chair. Yeah, I mean, if we bring it back, it needs to be tomorrow.
Number one, we've talked a lot about doing no harm. Number two, we are electing General Conference delegates. And do we want others to pay for them?
So Myron, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you really want to postpone, which means you send the legislation away.
That's fine. Send it away.
No.
Send it away.
Table means I need to find a place and a reason to bring it back tomorrow. Postpone means we never vote on it.
Let's postpone it.
You want to postpone it. Yes. The third option is to vote it up or down. You're going with postpone. Okay, so postpone. Is there a second to that? Second. There is debate, possible. Well, you know, I gave him a little latitude, but your point's well taken. Myron morphed into postpone. Hopefully not at my encouragement. I just wanted clarity. Are you seeking to speak to postponing? At microphone 2.
I'm sorry, Bishop Lois Nemeth from Olympia Fields United Methodist Church, and the reason why I did second on postponement, because this entire piece of legislation was very cloudy at first, until I had our pastor at the table explain a little bit more. The language inside here speaks quite a bit about fraudulent voting activity, and that portion made it very cloudy on the reasoning for holding back the funds from the conference. And understanding, if I have this correct, it's because of the multiple languages that the Book of Discipline, or the lack of in the other countries, is not there to make sure that whatever activities, fraudulent or no, are conducted properly in the General Conference.
Okay, so this is that was a speech to postpone.
Yes.
All right. Microphone 5, and then I'll come to 3.
As somebody who was at General Conference and
Are you speaking to postpone,
No,
or
I'm
against
speaking against
postponing?
postponement.
Against postponing.
Yeah.
Okay.
As somebody who was at General Conference and watched the celebrations on the behalf of some folks who were glad that the traditional plan passed, the offensiveness of that, the repeated over the number of years of General Conference, where we have seen and heard about voting irregularities and irregularities in the way that delegations are sent from Central Conference countries. This is not new, and it is time for General Conference to do something about it. And so a statement by withholding the funds to General Conference is appropriate. So I think we should act on this, not postpone it.
Okay, a speech against postponing. Who did I say? Microphone 3.
Sorry.
Are you speaking to postponing? Well then, we're on postponing. Okay. Microphone 3.
Kelly Beard, I use the pronoun she, her, and Holy Covenant clergy. So I rise to speak in opposition to postponement. This legislation was drafted particularly in response to the results of the special session of General Conference. And so when I was reading through this legislation and helping CCFA put it together, I was shocked to learn some of these things myself, which some of you might be feeling too, like you're reading this like, oh my gosh, this system is so broken. That's exactly the point, is that there's a number of ways in which our General Conference is completely dysfunctional. So that's number one. Number two is that by withholding our general administration fund from the General Conference, it signals to the General Conference that we dissent from the traditional plan. I'm speaking for that as my personal reason why I am supporting this petition and opposing the postponement because I'm not representing CCFA, because it doesn't matter which side you fall on, what side you fall on, General Conference is still dysfunctional. But for me, this is a stand against the traditional plan. Many of you have asked, what can we do? This is one thing that we can do. Thank you.
All right. Microphone 6, are you speaking on postponement?
I am, Bishop. Yes. John McCoy, Hinsdale UMC clergy. I want to speak in favor of postponing this motion because of the punitive nature that seems to undergird it. I think many people have been in congregations where there has been a very careful effort to resist people being very selective about how the funds of the church are used. I think historically within the church, within the Methodist Church in particular, there have been things that people have not wanted to support, and so they've exercised that power by trying to be very punitive. And so many of the important efforts of the Methodist Church that have been able to fund colleges or universities or other very important efforts have not always received universal support because of those who've tried to be very selective in terms of their support. While there might not be universal embrace of the plan that was voted upon, to send this kind of message to congregations of being very selective about how they support different things that are important to the general body might not be the best signal that we want to send at this time.
Okay, I can take one more speech against postponement. Are you against postponement? All right, microphone 4.
Oh, hello, okay. Brian Gilbert, clergy at Princeton First right now. I am speaking against postponement. I am a firm believer that budgets are moral documents and speak to what our core beliefs are. The United Methodist Church on their webpage describes the general fund as the oil that keeps the machinery running. And there are times the machine needs to be shut down and retuned. And I think after General Conference 2019, it's time to shut things down a little bit so that what our apportionments, which is an apportionment for others, is not transformed into apportionment to persecute others. And so I think it's important for us to act in the ways we can, and this is a way that we can act and be heard as a conference.
All right, thank you. I have 3 speeches for postponement and 3 speeches against postponement. So according to our standing rules, we now are going to vote on whether you wish to postpone or not. So you understand that if we postpone, that means this legislation will not come back to us tonight or tomorrow. And it disappears without voting on it because you're postponing it. You're sending it away. Do you understand? All right. All those who would vote in favor of postponement, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those who would not postpone. All right. It is not postponed. All right. The whole document's before us, but I have friends over at microphone 1. I remembered you.
Elaine Moy, Lady First Evanston, she, her, hers. I have a comment on a question that came before about general conference. When will you know the answer? The General Commission on the General Conference meets the first week of August, and I think they would have a lot of the answers that this conference is looking for by that time, if you want a certain date. My original intent to come to the microphone is if we withhold the money for General Administration Fund, can this conference, when it sends the money to GCFA, be very clear about withholding the money for the General Administration Fund? Because when GCFA receives the money, if it's in a lump sum and not by fund, they will just divide the money into 7 funds.
Ah, can somebody speak to that?
A friendly suggestion.
I think maybe something can be said to it. Is that what you're going to do, Kelly?
Yes. So when our apportionments are sent to the general church, we enumerate which ones we want them to go to. So all of the other funds. So what the legislation specifically states is that the conference would direct the conference treasurer to not pay that fund. So that's what would be communicated to GCFA. We would pay our general church apportionments to the other places that we pay to.
Okay. Just to make sure it's clear, because I know they've been just dividing by 7.
Right. Thank you. All right, this document is before you.
Bishop, a motion?
You have an amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Michelle Burwise Laycock, Extension Ministry, line 10, after the sentence to add a new sentence. This will be reviewed at the November 2019 Northern Illinois Conference Special Session to determine whether adequate changes have occurred in order to release the funds.
Is there a second? All right. Do you wish to speak to it?
Well, what was concerning me on this document is that there's not a date as to how long do we keep the funds and when do we release them.
Okay, they're not collecting funds, but how long this would be enacted?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Microphone 5, are you speaking to this amendment?
Yes. Chris Winkler, clergy, Barrington. We are not collecting the funds, so we can't release them. So that we either have to change the amendment or the amendment's improper, as I understand it.
Well, I don't think so. I don't have it yet, but my notes say this will be reviewed at the special session at November 16th.
And
it's
then
a little bit shorthand.
I think it went on to say, and decide whether or not to release the funds. It would be at that point to decide whether or not to begin collecting the funds, if I understand it.
Was that a part of your
Well,
amendment?
how would we say that it's okay to send the money? Will be collected then. Then we collect them. Help me out.
So, Lonnie, do you want to respond to that? Mm-hmm. Or somebody? Anybody? Are you leaving?
So Lonnie suggested to say, this will be reviewed at the November 2019 Northern Illinois Conference Special Session. Lonnie, where'd you go?
You have to keep your eye on him.
Whether to continue into 2020.
Okay. Whether to continue into 2020. All right, I'm going to have to put a pin in this in a minute, but let me take 4. Actually 3 has been at the microphone for a long time. Let's hear from 3, and then I'll hear from 4, and then we're going to have to put a pin in it unless you're ready to vote.
Mary English, a laity, Christ United Methodist Church in Rockford. And I'm speaking against the resolution.
All right, I'm just doing the amendment right now.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay. Okay, so, are you speaking to the amendment?
I have a question. Can I?
I'm just going to have the amendment.
Okay.
Amendment? Anybody in the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Opposed, the same. That means you get a review back at the November session. All right. Who? So the amendment was that this will be reviewed at the special session and whether to continue it or not. And do you need to revote that? Did you understand that's what you were voting on? Okay. All right. But we need to put a pin in this and come back to it tomorrow. It'll be the first legislation that we deal with. All right? Do you think you're ready to vote on it? Oh, my mistake. 3, do you want to speak then?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
And then I have to let 4 speak. And that's it. And then we either vote or we don't. Okay, 3.
Okay. Mary, English, and so on. And I'd like to speak against it, and in the interests of fairness, because we are not, the churches are not being billed for this particular money. However, churches, there might be some churches who would like to support this, and so I think we should enable them to do that, and they can send the money, and the conference can forward their money. And that's it.
Okay. Microphone 4.
Rich Wagner, Olympia Fields, Southern District. I have a question, and then can I also speak to it after the question?
You're going to speak to your question? Let's hear your question.
First of all, Lonnie, we love you very much. The question is, are other annual conferences proposing this same sort of thing?
Lonnie? Somebody?
Lonnie Chapin, Conference Treasurer. I have been in conversations with other conferences, but I can't, with other conference treasurers, but I can't say that I know that any of them are proposing this. So
I would like to speak against this.
Against the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you.
I understand the targeted punitive nature and trying to change things this way, but there is no real evidence that I've seen or heard that it will be received in the way in which it is intended.
Okay, speech against. Microphone 3.
Speech 4.
All right.
Mary Lou Eubanks, clergy, Sycamore United Methodist. Pronouns she and her. Before I became a member of the clergy in pastoral care, I made my living as a French interpreter. I have interpreted at the past 5 general conferences. It was an honor and a privilege back in 2016 to be the voice for Bishop Strife when he presided for the very first time at a session of the General Conference in French instead of in English. That was the highlight of my interpreting career. The low point was in Pittsburgh in 2004. I sat in 3 chairs with an American father and an African father. The American father was trying to help the African father understand his pain because his son was a homosexual. He had been raised in the Methodist Church and was no longer attending church and no longer believed in God because of the way the United Methodist Church was treating him. And his father was in pain, and he wanted this African man to understand that. And the African man listened, and he listened with patience, And then he reached out and he touched the American man's hand, and he said, "I too am a father. I feel your pain. I will pray for your son." And I thought, yes, there is hope. Until he added, "I will pray for your son to repent of his sin." But that African gentleman is a good man. He is a man who loves the Lord. And he also loves the United Methodist Church for bringing the good news to his grandfather and to his village. And he doesn't understand our culture. For him, homosexuality, if we open that door, we open the door to polygamy that they have worked for so long to get rid of. So I stand up here with very mixed emotions because I love the fact that our African delegates now have a voice that they did not have. But by the same token, I have witnessed the corruption. I interpreted for the young man who is the son of a bishop who is identified in the New York Times article. I have seen the fear in delegates' eyes when they want to vote against their bishop's wishes. It is sad that money talks. But money talks. I urge you to vote in favor of this.
All right. You know, I don't know that we can go a whole lot after 9 o'clock. So I feel like you finally are getting into what needs to be said about this piece of legislation. And I feel like in order to do justice to it, I need to put a pin in it so that we come back to it tomorrow. And if you would go to 6 and you would go to 4 and you would go to 3 and you would go to, is that 2? And I can't even tell if there's anybody over at 1. And now they're going there. Oh, get down. Seamus, is that you?
Yes.
Seamus.
Of course it is.
All right, so I feel like that's the justice we need to do to it. And we're not ready to vote. But we also need to come to the end of the day. Okay? Are we all right? All right. Yes, what? Microphone 1?
Bishop, I know that we are trying to come to the end of the day, so I'd like to ask for this to be included tomorrow, but I would like to make a motion from the floor.
On this?
Not on this.
On something else?
Yes.
Okay. Try it.
Okay. So I would like to ask that we shall, and I have the motion here ready to go for you, but we shall, at the Northern Illinois Conference of 2019, take a non-binding straw poll on the following question. If the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church were offered the opportunity to choose a direction for its future, should that direction be 1, a conference whose policies allow for clergy to officiate at same-gender weddings, allow for consideration of ordained ministry, people of varying sexual orientations and gender identities, and in which appointments are made with consideration given to the full range of contextual realities, or 2, according to the Book of Discipline as amended in 2019. The rationale being that at this time, clarity is crucial, and for this body to have something to let their congregations know at home where our annual conference is on this, being of the utmost importance. Along with that, we've just voted this task force to be created. This could be helpful in guiding their work if they know where we are on this. And finally, as we go forward, other annual conferences like Michigan are doing this. And knowing where annual conferences are, us doing it encourages others to do that, then we know who we can be working along with as we seek a future.
Is there a second? Okay, let me tell you what I'm going to do. All right? There's a second. I'm going to allow the body to decide if they will receive this legislation, because essentially you have late legislation, okay?
Yes.
But I'm going to let the body decide if you want to receive this legislation. If they do, then we can print it up or have it available, and we would discuss it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay? So this is what I'm going to do. Would you be willing to receive this, we'll call it legislation, to talk about tomorrow? If so, would you raise your hand? Thank you. If not, would you raise your hand? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We will receive it tomorrow. You've given it up here. We'll have it so that people have it available to see. We will put it after the other legislation to come up tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay? All right. I am going to report on a ballot. You've been at 6. Can I ask you, how can I help you? So that you could sit down, if nothing else.
It's okay. I came to speak against the motion that's on the floor.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to stand at 6 until tomorrow when we come to it.
Okay.
You can go right to 6 when we start talking about 700.06, and then you'll tell us what you want to say. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right. Let me report on ballot 7. Ballot 7, laity, 293 votes cast, 0 invalid. 127 needed for a majority. Adrian Hill was elected with 57% majority. All right, so the laity have elected their general conference delegates. And tomorrow you'll start on the jurisdictional delegates. Clergy, not so much. 219 votes cast, 8 votes invalid, 106 needed for majority, no election. Okay, so I don't know why I said that, because you're going to take a ballot. So actually, if you put up the laity results, and I'm going to have you take a ballot where you will vote for 3, which will be added to the general conference delegates, which you have already, 2? No, we're laity. No, laity are voting. You're going to vote for 3 to go with the others to jurisdictional. So the general people go to jurisdictional, but now you have 3 more who go to jurisdictional. So you will vote for the next 3 people you want, and they will go to jurisdictional. Got it? How many do you vote for? 3. They're going where? Jurisdictional. All right. Okay. Start your engines. Oh, you're not ready to do that yet? Okay, 1 second. Get those numbers.
Are we giving them 5 minutes?
I'm going to give them 4 minutes. But we're not ready. Don't vote yet. Not ready. Not ready. clergy, you can be in prayer that you're going to elect a few people. Not yet. Right, and laity, make sure you do not vote for Lonnie, do not vote for Nadia, and do not vote for Adrian. Check your numbers. Make sure that your numbers aren't for any of those people. All right, we're ready to vote? All right, then laity, vote for 3. I'll give you 4 minutes. All right, how you doing? Are you ready? Okay.
Say that clock is stopped. So it's just 5 minutes off. And we just keep going. That was the only way you could get through stuff in those days.
It's not fair to the technology.
No.
They knew we'd probably go for a little bit. Shouldn't go much. All right, laity, are you ready? Yes? Yes? Yes, all right, then I'm closing the laity. No? Is there a problem? And are you getting help for it?
52 sessions a year during our program.
It didn't quite come out right. I meant to be helpful.
It is helpful.
Now how are we doing? Ready? You got 30 seconds. There's a problem over here.
No, Shara's way behind.
How are we doing?
No, that's the
It's the
alarm.
4 minutes.
It started over again.
Are we ready? I'll give you just a little bit more time, but then we'll need to go on. Ready?
He's ready.
All right. We're ready. I am closing the laity ballot. All right. Now, if you would put up the clergy results. Okay. Laity, make sure you give your device to clergy if you haven't already. And you will vote for 2 people. Do not vote for Alka. Yes? Yes? Microphone 3.
Hannah, this is Hannah Hwayong Jung, clergy, Community United Methodist Church. I just want to share that I would like to be considered for jurisdictional, but not general conference.
Okay. Okay. You can take that into account. Clergy, you're voting for 2. And let me know when we can start the vote. All right, please vote now. All right. How you doing? All right, now how you doing? Do you need some help over there? Oh, okay. All right, how are you doing now? Ready? Huh? Yes, okay. All right, clergy ballot closed. Woo. All right, yes, you are getting a little faster at this, but we also need, outcomes as well. I think we probably have some announcements. We have announcements, and if Janet Hayes Stocking would please come forward or go to a microphone for the closing prayer.
Yes. Oh. Yes, announcements. Still, I am holding on to this jump drive. I hope someone will realize that they're missing it. I have it. People who went to the Forward and Next will hold a brief and interactive session after adjournment here in the Adventure Room tonight. And finally, please leave your voting machines on the table. Do not take them home. Do not put them in your pocket, in your bags, or any of your material. Leave it on the table. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Got a little scary here a time or two today, just in terms of how we were progressing, but we got some places here this evening, but also we have work to do tomorrow. So I encourage you to be in your seats at 8:30 because we're gonna pray and vote. It's gonna roll that fast. Pray and then vote. So microphone 6 will be our closing prayer, and then we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, let us pray. Dear gracious God, our precious Heavenly Father, we have praised you today in song, and we thank you for being here among us. We thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, to teach us how to love one another. We ask you to bless each one that's here and surround us with your love tonight as we go to rest and we return tomorrow morning for our meeting. We pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. And all God's people said, Amen.
Sleep well.